we've got a Tottenham update to bring to you today. And first and foremost, we are going to speaking about Ange Postecoglou, as David Ornstein has been speaking on the Postecoglou situation. And he says, a number of us have been reporting for quite some weeks now that Ange Postecoglou is increasingly likely to depart in the summer and Tottenham make a change in the dugout. That's been reinforced by reports by Matt Law in the Telegraph, Mike Keegan in the Mail, and the writing does appear to be on the wall as a result of a disastrous season domestically by Tottenham standards. They will now still hope to win the Europa League, which would be absolutely massive for them, not just in terms of a trophy, but qualification to the Champions League as well. Those reports point out that he could retain his job if a trophy is lifted. That said, it doesn't guarantee it, and he may go regardless. I think, judging by his comments in a number of the news conferences that has been taking place in recent weeks, he probably knows what's coming. It's kind of news that we have been speaking about over the past couple of weeks. Do you genuinely believe that if we win the Europa League, that he won't be our manager next season, or do you think he will be here?
I don't like the talk about it, to be honest, because if we're on the cusp of potential European glory, and we're already talking about replacing a manager when everyone should be geared towards winning that trophy and not thinking about replacing at the end of the season and distractions. I don't like these distractions when, that shouldn't be where the talk is. But unfortunately, given where we are in the league, it's no surprise that these are the discussions. For me personally, I look at the options that we're looking at replacing him with, and I understand if we don't win that Europa League, and obviously we have finished where we are in the league, disgracefully low, then I think a change has to be done, because you just can't survive a season that bad. But if we have won that Europa League, we have got a European trophy through the door, and we have got Champions League, I'm looking at the options. You're like, okay, let's replace the manager who's won this Europa League with like some of these options. And I'm just thinking, what's the point? You might as well just stick with it. And I know everyone's saying, oh, you don't want to be in a Ten Hag situation, blah, blah. But to be fair, they changed it with Ten Hag. And was that a right decision, to be honest? Maybe you could argue keeping Ten Hag was the wrong decision. They should have changed in the summer. And what's it called? They should change in the summer. Maybe they wouldn't be in this position if they did do that. But I'm saying once they made the decision to stick with him, was it right to sack him when they did? Because they've gotten a lot worse since they did sack him. And actually, they weren't even that far off the European spots when they did sack him, albeit they weren't playing very well. So I think, for me, like, are we really going to just sack Postecoglou? Postecoglou after winning a European trophy for some of the names being mentioned? I mean, if there was like a real high class appointment on offer, I think.
Would you consider that high class appointment though?
So, I don't know. Who would I can? Someone with better pedigree than some of the managers that we're being linked with. I don't know who we're being linked with. Who I'm thinking, all right, we're going to sack a manager who won us the European trophy and got us back in the Champions League for Marco Silva or a Frank, or we'll mention it in a minute. Scott, definitely not Scott. Someone like a Scott Parker. I think all these appointments, like, is it worth sacking Ange for these guys who we're talking about? If you're talking about maybe the guy Gasperini from Atlanta, or a really ambitious appointment. I know of some rumors about it. I don't believe it for a second, but there were some rumors about Alonso I saw, which obviously I don't think are going to happen. Or I don't know. Or if you're thinking about
any of these managers would be better than Ange, or could do better than Ange.
Do I think some of these managers could do better? I think some of these managers will finish higher than 17th, but I also think if we stuck with Ange, I'm confident we'll be a lot better next season. I am confident about that, in my opinion, if we did do that. So the question for me isn't, will these managers coming in do better than what we did this season? The question for me is, would these managers coming in do better than what Ange would do next season? That's the question for me.
Yeah, but we don't know, because it's all hypothetical, isn't it?
Well, of course, that's the whole point.
Like, we don't know how Ange is going to do next season, but what we do know has been the worst season on Premier League record this season. And
yes,
he's been worse than any manager that we've had in the Premier League era. That's
right.
That's
but if he wins Europa, but we're talking about in a hypothetical where he wins Europa League.
Yeah,
and then
even if he wins the Europa League, right, which is still a very big job and hard job to do at this stage. Even beating Bodo Glimt, which I fully expect us to do, going to a final, beating in Bilbao, and also going to beat a Manchester United team who know how to get over the line, won trophies in the last couple of seasons, even in their worst moment. Look, that is a very hard thing to do. If he does do that, that is massive credit to him. If he doesn't do that, then you're talking about literally the worst season ever that we've ever had to experience.
I've already said if he doesn't win it, then he'll have to move. He'll have to go.
Yeah, but why are you saying that if you genuinely think that he could do a lot better next season?
Because the job will be completely untenable. The fan base will be baying for blood even more than it is now, and he wouldn't have deserved to stay on. But if he wins that Europa League, it shows that he can bring success, because it would have shown he would have won a trophy. Would have won our first trophy in 16 years, our first European trophy in over 40 years, the biggest, basically one of the biggest trophies we've ever won in our history, and that's not insignificant. Even though we're a club of big size, we're not a club that wins trophies regularly. We're not this club like other clubs where we can just scoff at winning a trophy as if it's no big deal. This is massive for this football club, absolutely massive. And it would also show that despite all the crap we've been through this season and the terrible defeats and all this kind of stuff, despite going all through that, he still comes out with a trophy. He still comes out with tangible, real success. And that would show me something. If he doesn't do that, and we go through all this pain basically for nothing, and we can't even, and we don't end up winning that trophy, then we'll have no choice but to make a change, because you can't go for a season with no trophies and also finishing where we are in the league with one of the worst seasons. But if he does come out with a major European trophy, which is not insignificant. You can't just, people can't just scrap over that. Then I'm not saying he definitely stays. I'm just thinking there's a very good case that he should keep his job ahead of some of these other managers who I'm not massively thinking, I'm not desperate to sack Ange over, essentially.
I agree with, to a certain extent, in terms of, look, you definitely can't just gloss over it. And obviously it's going to be the biggest day in our Spurs supporting lifetimes. Definitely, if we go and win that tournament, 100%. But if it does come to that and we win the trophy, and on top of that we have the worst Premier League campaign that we've had in our lifetimes, it's how only at Spurs this can happen in the same season. We can have the worst and the best moments in our Spurs supporting lifetime. But like,
this is a conversation we've had over years, isn't it? When we want trophies, we're on top 4, we want trophies. I know you haven't said it personally, but some fans saying, I would finish 17th in a trophy. That's all I want. And now that's being put to the test, isn't it?
It is being put to the test. And still, for me, like, if he goes and wins it, fair play, credit to him. We owe him a lot for doing that, 100%. And he can walk out with his head held high. But I would still move on from him at the end of the season, because I just can't look past this current Premier League campaign that we've had. And I feel like that is what you're really going to be judged on. You're going to be judged, that is where you're at as a team and how well you're actually doing, is the Premier League campaign. And if you finish 16th, 17th, 15th, whatever, I just don't see how you can stay at a job even if you do win a trophy.
That's fine, and I don't disagree with you, but if the managers who are being talked about right now are the ones that we're talking about replacing him with, I would stick with Ange personally. If we are talking about someone with a higher caliber who's maybe used to Champions League football, all these managers, have they ever managed in the Champions League? I know Ange hasn't, but he's earned the right to get there because he's won the Europa League.
Glasner hasn't he?
Has Glasner managed in the Champions League?
Well, he won Europa League.
He won Europa League. Then he won. That's right. So he won Europa League.
Didn't we play him in the Champions League?
We played them, and I think they went out in the groups that year. Look, Glasner, maybe he would be one of the only ones, but I'm not like. It's not like I'm fawning over him, but I do like him. I think he's a great manager, and I think maybe he'd be one of the ones I'd go for. But I'm saying, like, these other guys like Iraola and Silva and Frank, I'm not like massively convinced that, like, if we were to replace Ange with them, like they would definitely do a better job if we were in the Champions League. I'm just not massively convinced.
Let's talk about this Mike Keegan article in the Daily Mail. He says that Scott Parker has admirers at Spurs. Bournemouth Andoni Iraola, Fulham Marco Silva, and Scott Parker, all potential candidates succeed Ange Postecoglou, who is expected to leave this summer. Others likely to follow Scott Munn out the door after review into reasons Spurs' underperformance carried out. Various departments within football operations are under the microscope, and a series of changes are expected across areas as the medical, sports science and analytics. There is a belief that the season has not been good enough across the board, and that responsibility for that lies not just on the head coach, as nobody is safe, said one insider with knowledge of the situation. First of all, Scott Parker. Let's talk about him first, because Scott Parker obviously has had a great season in the Championship this year with Burnley. I think they've conceded something silly like 15 goals all season. But I think we've seen this so many times with Scott Parker, haven't we? Like, has an unbelievable season in the Championship and then comes into the Premier League and does really bad.
Is it his third promotion?
I think it's his third. So he's done Fulham, Bournemouth, and now Burnley.
And Bournemouth, he resigned, didn't he? A few weeks into the season.
After he left.
Yeah. Just after losing 9-0, I think he resigned. Or maybe I can't remember if that was him. But anyway, he resigned very quickly because he was complaining about the transfer activity. Fulham, he got relegated with a pretty... You look at that Fulham team he got relegated with and where they are now. He got relegated with a pretty good Fulham team.
Was that his first job, the Fulham one?
Can't remember.
Must have been.
Very quiet. It was fairly early on, but he did get relegated. You look at that Fulham team; it was a pretty good Fulham team. They're all like doing quite well. All those players that he had, and he got relegated with that team. He went to Club Brugge. Don't think it went particularly well at Club Brugge, to be honest. And now he's at Burnley. Fair play. Got Burnley promoted with a brilliant defensive record, but the thought of putting him in charge of Tottenham.
It's too soon for him,
scares me for sure. Massively scares. He hasn't proven anything in the Premier League.
He needs to prove himself in the Premier League before we take him on, that's for sure. But I know he was a coach at Spurs for some time, and there's always like kind of highly rated as a coach. Obviously club captain at a time as well, with really good leadership ability, and I think he can be a good manager one day, but I just don't think he's there just yet.
Yeah, I'm not convinced he's ever going to be Tottenham manager. Good enough to be Tottenham manager. Maybe one day, but he hasn't. No, right now, there's nothing to suggest he's good enough to get Tottenham to be challenging for top 6 or whatever, wherever we want to be. There's nothing to suggest that.
Yeah, and on the situation with Scott Munn, and nobody is safe at Tottenham right now.
Hunger Games.
I feel like we hear about this like every summer with Spurs. Like, nobody's safe. Scott Munn was the one that came in and revamp the medical and the sports science and stuff. I mean, that in itself is probably a sackable offence.
Yeah, considering the problems we've had this season from medical department, has been absolute shambles. We should do a Tottenham Squid Games with all the staff. That's what we should do, and that's how we should whittle it down. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad that they acknowledged that there's been multiple failures, because I think we've all seen that throughout the season. And I know there's been, obviously, after Conte left, there was a big, PR thing about change and bring in people like Scott Munn and going in a different direction how we were operating. Now, I guess if you're the Tottenham board, you would argue, well, those things they take time to implement, they take time to see. You don't just change all these things and everything, the results change overnight. But obviously, it's been a couple years, 18 months to a couple years now since all those changes, and we're on course to have our worst ever Premier League season. So when you're looking at that, you can't exactly go and say, well, those changes are looking good at the moment, of course. So I understand the panic, and I understand they want to rip everything up and start yet again. But the worry for that is, if you do believe these things do take time to implement and change, and you're not going to see the fruits of that labor, in the short term, and it's going to be a long-term thing, then either you have no belief in what you were doing in the first place, or you've majorly screwed up and you think you've totally gone in the wrong direction and you need to go in a different direction, or you should just go through this pain, stick with what you're doing, and hope for that long-term benefit. Because what would happen is, let's say they go in a completely new direction again with all these different things, like Scott Munn, wherever they've signed, they've brought in V9, whatever, they bring a new medical team. What happens if next season, right, they're working out all the problems that we have, and they're trying to fix them, and they can't fix them within a year, and we have another disastrous season? Are they going to go another new direction the year
Probably.
after? That's the problem. At some point you have to stick with something. I'm not sitting here saying you have to stick with what they're doing, because I don't know exactly the specifics of the ins and outs. All I know is you can't keep just ripping everything up every couple years if in the hope of you're going to stumble across something that works. While at some point you do have to stick with something, and I'm not saying this is what to stick with. Maybe they have got it all completely wrong and they do need to rip it up, but I'm just saying there's a worry that they could rip up again, and then maybe in 2 years' time, we haven't seen the massive improvement that they're hoping for, and they rip up again.
Yeah, I mean, look, there's one thing, things going wrong and us finishing like 8th or 9th or 7th even, or you know what I mean. But there's one thing finishing 16th or 17th, like that just can't be on, and there has to be some consequences for that. There has to be, and I think this is what it's going to look like. Another manager that has been linked to Spurs by a German publication called Bild. They say that Tottenham have already inquired about the possibility of taking Borussia Dortmund coach Niko Kovac. Despite the 53-year-old only being appointed in January, Kovac has managed to turn things around at Dortmund in a short time that he's been in charge there, helping them challenge for the Champions League after a poor start to the season. This has helped raise the Croatian's reputation at Tottenham, with the reports suggesting that they're keeping a close eye on him for the remainder of the season. I mean, Dortmund had a disastrous start to the Bundesliga first half of the season. He has come in and I think he's had a massive improvement there.
Yeah, but I'm trying to remember. Yeah, he was the manager when Bayern beat us 7-2, I think it was. But I remember he got sacked very quickly after that. He didn't do a great job at Bayern, but obviously he must have got the Bayern job because he did quite a good job before that.
At Frankfurt.
He was at Frankfurt. Looks like he was a Croatian manager. He did fairly decent, was only in charge of 20 games. But he did do all right. 20 games, 10 wins, 5 draws. He was a Monaco manager for quite a while. Did a fairly decent job, it seems, there. Seems as though he didn't do a fantastic job at Wolfsburg. 66 games, 23 wins and 26 defeats. So didn't do a particularly great job. But then at Dortmund, he's only been in charge of 16 games. He can't exactly take massive I wouldn't like hire him based off that. 16 games, 8 wins and 5 losses. I wouldn't say, we must get him off the back of that specific job. Clearly he's a guy with a long managerial career, but when he's had his top job, he didn't particularly go great.
Yeah.
So
it's not one that excites me, to be honest. And I think with him only being appointed in January, I just can't see this one even being close to happening.
No.
Anyway, let's talk about Mathys Tel now. Kicker out in Germany says that Bayern Munich are understood to be willing to negotiate with Tottenham for forward Mathys Tel for well under 50 million euros option to buy, and hoping for an agreement to be reached. And Christian Falk also says that Tottenham are unlikely to exercise the option to buy for Mathys Tel, and hoping that they can come to some sort of agreement with Bayern Munich. Again, this just worries me a little bit that, you know, you're hearing reports that Bayern are willing to settle for well under 50 million for someone like Mathys Tel. Like, it feels like they're just trying to get him out the door as quickly as possible, and they don't even care about like getting the maximum amount of money for him. Something just doesn't sit right for me with this.
They let go of Gravenberg, didn't they, after a season? And look what he's doing at Liverpool. So just because they want him out doesn't mean he's a bad player or it's a bad decision. I don't know what's happened with Tel and Bayern. All I've seen the reports that Kompany for some reason doesn't see a future with him in the club. I don't know why that is, but all we can do is judge on what we're seeing. I think he's improving. Has he shown to be at the moment a £50 million winger in his few games he's had at Tottenham? Probably not, I would say. I think that's fair to say. I wouldn't say I've seen 50 million's worth of talent just yet. Throughout his career, is there potentially a 50 million plus winger in there for sure? I think you could, from the potential we've seen of him over his career. But at Tottenham, I think we still haven't seen his best, and we still haven't seen him hit anything other than decent performances. Played pretty well against Forest, but obviously he's got between now and the end of the season to kind of impress. But I think if we're able to renegotiate that fee, and if it's well below 50 million, I'll definitely go for it. I think there's a potential fantastic talent there who's versatile, who I think a lot of managers could do a lot with, and he's still very, very young for what he's shown at his age. There are not that many players of his age that have shown what he's shown in top leagues and have got them that many minutes behind him. So I think it would be stupid not to, if he's available to renegotiate that fee, to go for it, I think.
Yeah, I think like if we could do a deal for like 20 million, I think I would do that. But then you are looking at, you know, it's a massive, massive transfer for us to make because we're looking for Sonny's successor. This is what this is. And we need to get this one right. And we need to get someone that can kind of fulfill the potential and the void that Sonny's going to leave at this football club, because I don't see Sonny being here past probably next season, We've got the likes of Mikey Moore here. We've got Odegaard here. We've got very young wingers. And I feel like we need someone that is going to produce for us straight away, week in, week out. And I'm just not sure if Tel is that guy. And if we do sign Tel, is there a space in the squad for us to sign another winger?
If we sign Tel, is there space in the squad for us to sign another winger? Not without limiting someone like Moore, probably.
Because that's what I'm saying. If we're signing Tel, that's basically us saying those are the wingers that we're going to go into next season with. And is that good enough?
Or Johnson, Odegaard, Tel, and Son.
And more.
If I'm comparing it to other people's wingers in the league, I think you'd probably want one more higher caliber one in there. Probably on the right, though. That'd probably mean moving on someone like Johnson, unless you want to get rid of Odegaard, which I don't think so. So, yeah, I think potentially it could be. But I think right now, as going into next season, I don't think I'd confidently
let's say we get Champions League football. Are you confident that we can be decent in that competition with those wing options? I'm not so sure.
Well, if Tel and Odegaard can fulfill and protect their potential, then yeah. But it's all about, it's a question mark, obviously. We're not going in there with a Saka or a Kavisha or a Salah who's been there and done. Obviously, we'll have Sonny. It depends. Maybe if it's a different manager, maybe we'll see a better Sonny potentially next season. If that's the case, then potentially those wingers could be good enough. But if it's the same manager and he's going to play Son the same way, then there's definitely a big question mark about it. I don't sit here say definitely not, because maybe if we could see a much better Tel. Also, Odegaard's not going to be out for the whole season like he's pretty much been this season.
You'd hope anyway.
You'd hope. But, hopefully he can stay fit, and he's shown what he can do when he's been on the pitch, and hopefully a whole season of that will be much better. Johnson's been our top goal scorer. So I don't think these are bad. I don't look at that and think, oh, God, what terrible options. I think those are good winger options, but I don't think it's good enough.
You've got aspirations to get into the top 4, right? And I just don't think next season that's like a top 4 caliber kind of, winger.
Could be, I think.
Options. I think it's below that. And I think in the future, looking at the future, I think they can grow into that for sure. But right here, right now, I don't think so.
Yeah, but Forest are doing it with Elanga and Hudson-Odoi. Like, they're good players, don't get me wrong. Before the season, you wouldn't have said those are top 4 caliber wingers. It depends about if you can get the best out of them.
Yeah. Fair enough. But I think Forest have something else going for them, and that's like the defensive structure with Milinkovic and Murillo, and they sit very deep and they just spring on them in the counter-attack. That's not what we do. We have a clear emphasis on our attacking players, and we need them to be better.
But maybe a year of growth with Tel and Odegaard, they could be better. Maybe we could see more out of them.
Let's talk about specific players. Graham Bailey says that Jared Bowen holds some concerns about West Ham under Graham Potter, and Tottenham are closely monitoring the situation. I'm sure we are, mate. I'm sure we are closely monitoring it, but he's got a contract until 2030. And first of all, if he even considers coming to Tottenham, his
taking his life in his own hands.
But pretty much, not only from the West Ham fans, not only from everyone at West Ham, but from his own family. His father-in-law will not let that fly, will he?
And I don't think West Ham would sell to us. Also, if he is for sale, there's going to be a queue of clubs, top clubs, in for him. The likes of I'm not even talking about Liverpool and Arsenal, who I probably would be interested anyway. But I'm talking about even like the likes of Newcastle, Villa, all these clubs, Forest even probably. They would all be interested in him. And I just don't see him wanting to ruin his reputation at West Ham going to Tottenham. So I think he would be perfect for like a Newcastle. Imagine a front three of Gordon, Isaac, and Bowen. Like, just be unbelievable.
I'd love to see Bowen at Spurs, to be fair.
I would love it. I think it'd be perfect for us as well, because, him and Johnson on the right, good options there. I just can't see him coming to Tottenham by any stretch.
Yeah, me neither. It'll be nice shithousery, though, if we could get him.
Well, I mean, we've done it before with Defoe.
Yeah,
but that was the last time. That was the last time. Yeah,
Defoe and Carrick were the
there'll be
last
protests every get. Like, they're never going to allow it to happen. They'll never allow it to happen.
Another one is saying that Tottenham would be interested in signing Marcus Rashford this summer if Villa decide against making the loan move permanent. I mean, I've been hearing stuff about Marcus Rashford saying he's even considering going back to Man United. He's keeping all his options open and for next season. I think he's desperate for that move to Barcelona, which is doing the rounds in the press. I don't think he'll end up at Barcelona. But, you know, the wages are always going to be the sticking point with Spurs. He's on like 350k a week. And I don't know. I feel like he could end up staying at Villa, to be honest. I think he fits them quite well.
Judging by what you've seen, because when we were linked with him in January, you were dead set against it. But judging what you've seen
at Villa... I wasn't dead set against it.
You were?
I was
you said it'd be another Sancho or something? I can't remember what you said.
Nah, I wasn't. I was saying on a 6-month loan deal, I think we should do it. That's what I said. And from what I've seen... I think it'd be a smart signing, to be honest, for Spurs. I think he's done well for Villa. I don't think he's got maybe the goal contributions regularly that maybe his performances deserve or suggest, but he's always a threat in every game. He literally seems to be a threat every single game.
He seems like he's got a weight lifted off his shoulders. He's playing like a new player. He's like maybe getting away from United and all that pressure of being, you know, their star boy and being their main man and being in Manchester, where he's, you know, is always followed by the press and everything. And maybe it's just different in Birmingham and Villa, where he's less of a... Obviously, he's a star name, but he's less of all this pressure about being the guy everyone's got their hopes on and everything. And every little thing is scrutinised when he's at Man United, whereas Villa's probably looks like a different. Also, you know, when he's on the bench, it's not a big story. It's like just whatever. He's on the bench for a game, and United, it's just very different. So you can just see the weights that have been lifted off his shoulders.
Forget Rashford though. I don't think it's a hope and hell for us to get Rashford with the wages that he's on. We should be going for Watkins.
I'll take Watkins for sure.
We should go for Watkins.
I'll take Watkins.
Why not? Why
sell Richie and get Watkins?
Yeah, like why wouldn't we be able to go for Watkins? Because I don't think he's going to be going to Arsenal now. So like, where's Watkins going to go? Unless like Liverpool try and get him, I think we should be in a good place to get him.
Well, depending how much they want, they probably want 50 million. Sorry, 60 million. I mean, I think it's worth it. And Solanke.
I think he's better than Solanke.
Yeah, for sure. I think so as well. I think them two competing for a spot would be a great situation.
Next up, we're going to talk about a player called Mario Gila. Court Offside says that Man City, Tottenham, Bayern, PSG and Real Madrid all interested in signing Lazio defender Mario Gila. The 24-year-old has a €45 million price tag. I mean, when you see the names Man City, Bayern, PSG, Real Madrid... And then Tottenham. I don't think we have a hope in hell, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, who was he? A right back? No, centre back. Centre back. We're probably going to need a centre back in the summer. So maybe if we get a good price for Romero, and we can stump the others on if we're more serious about him being starters than the other teams. But look, if that article is genuine, then it doesn't sound like we got much of a chance, but you never know.
Yeah, but another centre-back that we're linked with is Jan Bissek of Inter Milan, as Rudy Galletti says that Tottenham are competing with 3 Premier League clubs who are Everton, West Ham and Bournemouth to sign Inter Milan centre-back Jan Bissek, who will be available for the right price in the summer. Yeah,
I think Bissek would be a very interesting prospect.
I don't know much about him.
Yeah, he's been very good for Milan into this season. He started quite a few games, and he's a big guy, 6'4". But the thing is, he's playing regularly into Milan. Why would he jump ship to come to Tottenham? I mean, I guess you could argue, Premier League, the money, that's where the money is. And even though he's at a top club in Milan, challenging for titles and Champions Leagues potentially, the money at the Premier League is just where it's at. And even a club like Tottenham could prize him away. But I don't see him being in a rush to come to Spurs.
But the 3 teams linked with him are Everton, West Ham and Bournemouth. Why not any bigger clubs being linked with him?
Your guess is as good as mine. I don't know how reliable that journalist is. Rudy Galletti's a bit hit and miss, isn't he? But look, he's been quite good for Milan. I know he's started like over 20 games this season for Inter, but they play a back 3 obviously, but he's been pretty good for them.
And last but not least, Give Me Sport are saying that Tottenham are keeping a close eye on Archie Gray's little brother, Harry Gray, 16-year-old striker, just made his debut for Leeds last weekend, and obviously they've just been promoted to the Premier League. And it's understood that Tottenham have sent scouts at several of Harry's matches this season, and there's a growing feeling within the club that they could look to prize him away from his boyhood club very, very soon. So I know Archie's probably the scout that they've been sending.
Exactly. Agent Archie. Get him in, get the Gray brothers in there, and they'll rule Spurs for the foreseeable.
Yeah, do you remember when we did sign Archie Gray, we had that Leeds fan on, and we were talking about Archie, and he was like, "Whatever you do,
Yeah.
leave Harry alone."
We're gonna have the back line, we're gonna have the midfield and the strike force sorted. We just need a Gray in defence, and then it's all good.
Yeah. But look, that is your Tottenham update. Let us know in the comment section below your thoughts regarding all the news stories we've broken to you today.